there might not be easy answers for why you're suffering or when this suffering will end. But in the meantime, don't do it alone. Mm-hmm. Get around people that will love you through it and will help you. And that's a beautiful thing about community.
And welcome back to the Intuitive Pathway podcast. Today, I'm excited to talk with Reid Gehring. He has a doctorate in science with physical therapy, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so and my sister, she's not here today, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's too bad.
Yeah, she's sick. She really wanted to talk to you. She was interested in talking to you about pain and how people interpret that, but... Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on.
I'll get a chance to chat with her in the future.
Yeah, we'll have you on again for something different.
Absolutely. Lots to talk about.
Okay, well, do you mind introducing yourself and telling everybody about you and what you do?
Yeah, so I'm Reid Gehring, and I'm a physical therapist by trade. I do teach in a local physical therapy program where we train physical therapists, but I still am active in physical therapy practice. My specialty is called orthopedic physical therapy. That's where I get to work with people that are having pain of all sorts. So shoulder, back, spine issues, nerve-related issues. I love this field because you get to talk with a patient who's obviously in pain and suffering, and you get to figure out what's causing their problem. Okay, you're looking for minor cues of different symptoms and putting it all together and putting together a treatment plan. And I'll tell you what, physical therapy works for most orthopedic issues. So we're to keep people away from having to be dependent upon pain meds or surgery and so forth. So that's my area of practice. Been doing that since 2008. Yeah, so it's a lot of fun.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, looking forward to talking about
it. So 2008, that's when I graduated high school.
Was it? Okay.
So you've been doing this a while.
I was already through PT school by then. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So what initially got you into it? Like, what made you want to do physical therapy? Did you always have a passion for it?
Not until I didn't really discover physical therapy kind of as a profession until my senior year in high school. Before that, I was kind of dabbling in, do I want to do engineering? Problem is, I was never really good at math, and so I don't know what I was thinking there, but it sounded cool.
Yeah.
So I kind of looked at that, and I've always been an athlete, played high school football, and so whenever I started learning about physical therapy and how clinicians use exercise to help get people better, I was like, ooh, exercise. I like exercise. I like physical activity. Maybe this would be good. And so the more I researched it, had the opportunity to speak with some clinicians around town just about their job and everything, and actually got to take a job as a physical therapy technician, which is kind of a helper for a physical therapist. Once I got exposed to that, I'm like, this is what I want to do. And so, got into college, very determined to get the grades needed to get into PT school, and got out, and
How long is the school? Because now you have to have a doctorate, right?
Yeah.
It's not just...
All programs are doctorate level.
Yeah.
So you have to have an undergrad degree. So most people, if they take some college credit classes in high school, people can get their degrees in, less than 3 years now. But for most people, it's about 4 years to get an undergrad. And then you gain acceptance into a physical therapy program. And pretty much all physical therapy programs are 3 years. So in the program I teach at, it's 2 years of academic, work where we're just cramming all kinds of information in our students' heads. And then we send them off for the final year where they actually get to work in the many different areas of physical therapy, which, when you graduate from physical therapy school, you're a generalist. So you can go work in a hospital. You can work in an outpatient, working with people who've had stroke or spinal cord injuries. You can work in wound care. Physical therapists do wound care. I've done plenty of that in my career. Yeah, it's really interesting.
Your favorite?
I mean, not the thing I wanted to do, but it's still interesting. Or you can do orthopedics, like what I'm in. You can work with pediatrics, so little kiddos that have developmental disorders that keep them from being able to run and play like normal kids. Pediatric physical therapists get to try to make their life better. And so there's lots of different, we get trained in all of it, and then we kind of specialize, in whatever we want to do.
So what made you want to go the orthopedic route? And can you explain to people what that is exactly?
Yeah, so it's essentially if you have any type of pain condition, or that's, you're doing yard work and you strained your shoulder, or you went to pick up a box, and now all of a sudden you have back pain, and every time you tie your shoes you just have excruciating pain in your back and down your leg. Those are typical what we call musculoskeletal related issues. And so a patient that had those things, they can either come directly to a physical therapist, or they can go to their physician first. And the physician can decide, if they want to give them some pain meds and send them to PT, or wait and see how things go. The best thing is to get into a PT pretty soon after that, because we can get you on the road to recovery pretty quickly if we catch you soon. But pretty much anybody that has pain in their body, joint, nerve related, they can come see me, and I can, in most cases, I can get you better.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, how do people come and see you? Like, if they wanted to see Reid personally, do they need a referral? Do they need to just call where you work? How does that work?
It largely depends on how the treatment's going to get paid for. And so insurance companies, there's a number of different private insurance companies out there. And depending on what that insurance requires, the patient needs to follow that. So I'll have some patients that their insurance will pay for physical therapy whether or not the patient saw their physician first. And so in that case, they can come see me, what we call direct access. So if you had an insurance plan like that, you just call me up and say, hey, I'm having some, foot pain. I'd like to see you. And I'd call and I'd schedule you to come in for an appointment. And then you'd come in, and then we just bill your insurance. But then there's some insurance companies that say, no, we want you to go through these hoops first. And so if that's the case, I'll tell the patient that, and they'll go see their physician. And if the physician agrees to that plan, they'll send them to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
What all do you do personally? And it's orthopedic, but is it chiropractic, acupuncture,
that's a good question.
Stretching? I don't know the whole bit, but what all do you personally do?
And so this is the thing with physical therapists. We're all trained in physical therapy in general, but if you're going to go see an orthopedic physical therapist, you're going to get some variation in care. Okay, and it just depends on the training, sometimes the personal preferences of the physical therapist you see. Me personally, I take a very well-rounded approach to seeing all my patients. Number one is education. I include that as it's almost the keystone of any physical therapy treatment, because I need my patients on board with the treatment regimen. And if they're not on board, it's going to take longer for them to get better. So I really emphasize education. What that includes is, educating the patient on, what's the problem, what's their role in making it better, and what I can do for them along that process, And so what that immediately does is it gives the patient some control in the situation. Because when you're having pain, and I've had plenty of the disorders that I treat, and so they're miserable. Yeah. Having a disc herniation or something like that, you feel very helpless. Because you're like, oh my gosh, I'm having this pain. I don't know why. I can't do the things I want to do, and it's a scary thing.
I know, you always take your health for granted, because whenever something like that happens, you're like, wow, okay.
Yeah, until it's gone, right?
Yeah, until it's gone.
And so there's a lot of fear. I see a lot of fear in a lot of my patients. And so the first thing I want to do is I want to deal with that fear. And I want to put their pain or their disorder in the right perspective for the patient. I want to empower them. And so that's number one for me. Once that's accomplished, then I use a mix of different treatments. So therapeutic exercise is something that we physical therapists do really well, that distinguishes us from other practitioners. And so therapeutic exercise is any type of very specific stretching, strengthening exercise, coordination exercise to get the muscles back online. Anytime you have pain, let's say you have shoulder pain, the muscles surrounding that area become very dysfunctional. They just stop working like they need to. And so that will lead into more dysfunction and more pain until we get that back online. So see where you're at with your disorder, and I start prescribing the initial therapeutic exercises to get those muscles online and to help stimulate healing. Also, if I determine that you need manual therapy, then I'll do manual therapy. And so manual therapy is anything that a physical therapist does with their hands. So that means that we can find soft tissue restrictions where the tissue's in spasm or it's just tight, and we can loosen that with our hands.
Like massage therapy, sort of?
It's
Or trigger point?
It's similar to massage. It's not like the massage that you would get going to like a licensed massage therapist where they're focusing on like a whole body. This type of soft tissue works very specific to an area.
That's why I was wondering if it was trigger point. My sister,
Yes.
she's a massage therapist, and she's the only person I'll go to because she actually, if there's a problem, so there's this, well, maybe I'll talk about this later because it bleeds into something else.
Yeah.
But, she'll actually find a place, and then she'll find the trigger point and press on it, and my muscle will literally
Yes.
it
It hurts, doesn't it?
It like hurts, but in the right way, because that's like fixing the problem. So is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. So trigger point. Yeah, massage therapists do really good at that.
Some do.
Finding those spots.
Some do.
And releasing them. Yeah, I'll do that same thing.
Okay.
Trigger points are areas in muscle. Normally muscle's nice and pliable. You should be able to put pressure on it. It should have give. Shouldn't be painful. But trigger points are little areas, usually in response to overuse or pain conditions, to where that muscle just gets knotted up. And it can cause all kinds of symptoms. Like let's say you had a trigger point in your shoulder blade muscles. That can hurt where the trigger point is. It also can refer pain down the arm.
Yeah.
And so it can be, some people think that they have some type of nerve that's pinched in their neck causing those symptoms.
So
it's just a muscle.
You're literally going where I was going to go.
Yeah, we can talk about that. Yeah.
So there was this one time I had like this pain in my back. And then all of a sudden, my legs stopped working. It was really weird. But they'd like just stopped. And I would walk and they would tense up to where I had to sit down because they just weren't working right.
Yeah.
And I thought like I had a serious back issue. Like what else could it be? And then I thought like there's something wrong with my spine. I go to my doctor. He's like, I don't think there's anything wrong with your spine. I'm like, okay. So I go see my sister, and she's like, I'm telling you, it's probably not. She's like, I've seen so many people come in thinking they have like a spine issue, and really it's a muscle issue.
Muscle, yeah.
And so she started working, like, it was like right here. She like pressed on the inside. Like there's, I don't even know. It was like...
Probably the paraspinal is what we call them.
Don't know, but it was like close to my spine.
Yeah, paraspinal.
Yeah, and then she started like doing like the glute ones all the way down my hamstrings.
Yeah.
And she said they were so tight, but all of a sudden I just felt them all like releasing. And I guess what happened, I was really stressed out. Like I was at a point in my life where I had so much anxiety. I was stressed out every day, like to the max.
Yeah.
And I think my muscles had just gotten so tight from all of that, like my body couldn't handle it anymore.
Right.
And so I was curious, it's like a two-sided question. Do you think a lot of times spinal issues and things like that are actually like muscular issues? And then also, how much does stress and anxiety play a part in pain?
Right.
Like fibromyalgia, like the classic.
Oh yeah.
Classic example.
That's a challenging disorder that's multifactorial.
Yeah.
But to your first question about our muscles, what we call pain generators, right? So what's causing my symptoms? What I see is that you can have issues that are only muscular related. More often, at least in my practice, what I see is that the original pain generator was maybe a disc herniation. Okay, and those can range from small to large ones, right? Or it's a joint-related issue. You just wake up with, you slept wrong, and you feel like you got a crick in your neck, and you're kind of dealing with that for the next few days, and now you have all this tension in your upper back, and it's like, well, was that tension there in the first place? No, it was in response to the initial disc-related issue or joint-related issue. And so what I often will see is that a lot of my patients that come in that have had pain for 6 weeks or longer, their initial injury has probably resolved because the body's really great at healing itself. But the muscular system surrounding the joints, surrounding the disc, it goes in protective mode whenever we have pain. And it does that, for a good reason, right? Because it's trying to guard, it's trying to tell you, I don't want to move this area until it's healed. Sometimes that protective mode doesn't relax. Sometimes it stays in a protective mode. And so that joint got better, but now those muscles are tense, and when they're constantly active, they start developing trigger points. And so now you have another layer of pain.
A double-edged sword,
So any patient that comes into the clinic, whether it's shoulder issues, knee issues, or whatever, I'm always looking at we call it the soft tissue, right, the muscles. I'm always looking at that because it's so commonly involved as a secondary issue, for pain. And so your second question was about stress.
Yeah, how much does stress and things like that contribute to these types of issues? Because from what I am gathering, I think that's a contributor to a lot of health issues, and you just don't know it.
Yeah.
A lot of people will think they have a mental disorder, and truly it's just stress that hasn't been dealt with. Or maybe a bowel issue, and it's stress that hasn't been dealt with.
Yeah.
Same thing, it's like your body can only take so much before it starts giving somewhere.
Right. Yeah, stress is very harmful to the body. I totally agree, because stress can affect our muscles, right? And how it affects our muscles is through us staying tense, tends to be up in this region, the upper back, neck region. This is where most people hold their stress.
Oh, I had a stressful day yesterday, and let me tell you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, my wife, she'll do that, and sometimes I catch her. She's busy with the kids, and I just see her shoulders up like that, and I'll just come along beside her and just kind of touch her shoulders, and her shoulders just go down. But if she's doing that for hours at a time, those muscles are not meant to stay in a constant state of contraction like that, and so it causes pain. And so what I'll see is stress-related muscle tension, stress-related headaches. You can have trigger points in your upper traps and scalenes that can actually cause headaches. And so you're like, I'm having these headaches, and they're coming on every time the kids come home from school or whatever, and there's a reason why. But so you have muscle-related issues. Stress, fear, worry, they can affect our sleep. But we can't turn our minds off at night. And sleep is so important for the body. Our brain does not become inactive at night. It becomes very active. It goes into work cleaning up, different residue that builds up in our minds during the day, both mental and physical residue. And what we need is restorative sleep. And so if you don't have good sleep, then your body's going to suffer from that. Your organs are going to suffer. Your muscular system's going to suffer. Your mood's going to suffer. And so what's one of the causes that can cause non-restorative sleep? Well, it's stress and worry and not dealing with that. And so you got to find ways to work through that. And there's multiple different ways to do so.
Do you work with people on helping them find solutions to their stress if that's a cause of it? Because, whenever I initially met you, that's why I wanted to talk with you, because you had a little bit more of a holistic approach, you could say. And so I figured you might take some sort of approach like that. Do you?
I do. I try to take a holistic approach, and this is somewhat taught in school, but then it's like I said, if you go see an orthopedic physical therapist, you're going to get different shades of a PT. It just depends on what continued education they've had, what type of information they've consumed, what literature they've been following. I like the holistic approach because a patient is not just their joints and their muscles and their nerves, right? They're a whole being, and our emotions affect our state of health.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm not a psychologist, but I find myself having to go into that role in some parts of the treatment. Right?
I totally understand what you mean.
And I'm not making diagnoses of, oh, you got anxiety, you got depression. I'm not doing that because I'm not trained or licensed to do so. But I know about those disorders.
And
I can recognize it.
Isn't it funny how that always seems to come up too? Because I have found that working with nutrition, and I don't know if it's a lot like dealing with men, and men are supposed to be tough and they don't have emotions and they can't talk to people. Right. But I have found that whenever I work with men with nutrition, somehow they want some sort of like side counseling, but not really, like under the guise of nutrition. Yeah. And again, I'm not a counselor either, but it is funny how we have both seen that same thing where people, they have like a physical issue, but still somehow another issue arises underneath the surface.
And we have to talk about that. And, me and you, is when we start seeing that in our clients or our patients, we have to recognize when they need more than just what we can give them. Mm-hmm. And we have to be able to have people that we can refer to, so that they can dig in deeper to that. Mm-hmm. But otherwise, we're recognizing things that are going wrong and things that are contributing to their digestive issues, right? To their stress and their muscle tension. And we're talking them through that. It's kind of like what I said earlier, is when people are dealing with chronic pain that, I've worked with people that have had pain for, months at a time, years at a time, and I've never seen a physical therapist, or they had failed physical therapy previously, and they just don't have the answers they need, and me being able to take on that education component, tell them, hey, this is the plan, this is what you should expect, and we start seeing results from the treatment plans that I'm doing, you just see that stress and anxiety start to go away, If you have chronic pain, there's a high likelihood that you're going to have depression as well. Not knowing why you have chronic pain or what the solution is can also drive up your anxiety. And so we see intermixing of those in our patients. And we got to be able to know how to address it. And oftentimes it's not just, hey, this patient needs to go and take some medication for it. Sometimes they just need to have somebody to talk through it. And, I'm always happy to be that person in the midst of me providing therapeutic interventions. Talking to my patients is key to address those issues.
Do you find that you have that a lot? I mean, and maybe I know you can't speak for your wife, but I've even spoken with her quite a bit on the baseball field because our sons are on the baseball team together. Right. But she was telling me how much like pain she's in, and do you find that that same thing? Yeah. So with the digestive issues that she has, which are those are challenging. When food doesn't become a life source for you, when it becomes a source of pain, that can be a lot really
of issues.
Trip you up. You're like.
That hurts me as a physical therapist too. I've seen some of the secondary effects of some of those food intolerances that she's had, because it'll actually manifest as some musculoskeletal issues. My stomach hurts, but now I got these weird soft tissue issues in my upper trap or in my back, and I can release those, but I can't fix the digestive issue. And so that's something that pains me, because I feel a little out of control, like I don't have
like
control
you want to
over
fix
that.
it, but
I want to
fix
it.
Yeah.
I want to fix it, but I have to let her, go the medical route and pursue other options.
Have you guys found some pretty good options?
Yeah, I mean, really, with her issues, just learning about food and what are sources of clean food, avoiding processed food. Really looking at your food labels. In the American diet, there's just so much junk out there that's just not good for our body. It has some nutritional content, but overall it's just not good for us. And so what we've learned along this journey is to seek out the best sources of food, the cleanest sources of food, and what to avoid. And we're still learning. Yeah. But she is such a trooper. I mean, she's just such a tough woman.
Dealing with 4 kids and having issues, I can't imagine.
Yeah, she pushes through, and it's going to get better. You know? It's just learning to manage it. You know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like one step at a time. You find one thing that works, then it's not quite all the way, and just step by step by step.
Yeah.
And the more I've learned with nutrition, you can have a reaction to anything.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can go buy some sort of fruit or vegetable, but it has a pesticide in it that you just can't tolerate.
Right.
Anything. It can have, you bought it out of season,
mm-hmm.
and it might have a high lectin content that you can't handle.
Right.
It could be a number of things.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And you see that stuff, and I know that that all of this nutrition things that we're talking about are not in the medical mainstream. I think that's what's so frustrating for patients like my wife, and many others, is that we don't fully understand it. We're gaining more insight into it, but there's such a diversity in our genetic makeups and how we react to food that it's hard to do studies on that,
Yeah.
Because there are some people who are just more vulnerable, and we don't necessarily know why they're more vulnerable to certain foods or pesticides or whatever, but they are. But I'm encouraged, even though it's not directly in my field, the research that is going on looking at the microbiome in our gut and how important our gut is for mental health, physical health. I'm so encouraged by that. They were actually looking into that, and I think that the future looks very bright. The more we look into that, I think we're going to solve a lot of some of these chronic autoimmune type issues.
That's kind of what your wife has,
I think we're going to
right?
start to unlock some of the keys. Yeah, she has a condition called celiac.
Yeah.
Which is any type of gluten, and sometimes it's just within the family of gluten. Anytime that enters into her body, it's like full attack mode. The body just starts attacking it. And so.
What about gluten that she doesn't digest? What if does she react to gluten if it touches her? Anything?
I don't think she's that sensitive to that. Some people are, though.
Yeah.
Just touching it will cause a reaction. But it's mostly just, if she gets it in her diet. So we have to be very careful where, what restaurants we go to. Do they use, what are their kitchen prep techniques and stuff like that? Because if you had bread on this surface, and you no longer have bread, but now you have my wife's meal on there, it's contaminated. There's no discernible bread or gluten there.
Yeah.
But she'll react to it. And some people are really sensitive. Hers seems to be pretty sensitive to that. So it's like she's fighting a virus if she eats that food that's been contaminated by gluten. She's learned to recognize it. And she says, I got poisoned.
She was poisoned that
what she'll
day.
say.
Oh, it's sad.
She got poisoned, and she just fights it out. It takes about a week or two.
Oh, it takes a week. It's that
to get back to normal. Yeah, so it's hard for other people to, I think, really understand, but I certainly can sympathize with it.
Yeah, and it's almost like like an invisible illness. Like everybody's like, come on.
Yeah.
It's not that bad, and your poor wife is over there.
You never know it from her because she never complains about it.
Aww.
She keeps going, keeps the kids active, and just goes about her life.
Yeah.
It's only those who are really close to her that might start hearing about it.
Yeah.
Any complaints, but she doesn't complain. That's just her nature.
Yeah. And I remember, I think you were telling me that, wasn't it like the doctors weren't really giving you any answers, then you guys did like a little bit of your own research and figured that out?
Yeah, and I don't blame any of the physicians because they did everything that they needed to do, and this is just, it's one of those things that I think she probably just has a genetic susceptibility to this, to celiac obviously, and probably to some other stuff that's not really known, but yeah, we had to kind of research it ourselves. And we found out, that people can have a gluten sensitivity. Some people just don't eat gluten just for health reasons. We found out that from my wife that she didn't need to eat gluten for like big time health issues, so she wouldn't feel sick.
Yeah.
And so we figured that out. We do what you call an elimination diet, and it's to where you just totally take out certain food groups for about 30 days because you got to get that out of your system. And then you slowly reintroduce new food groups, and that's how you can figure out what the culprit is. And so that's what we did. both gluten and dairy too. She had a real sensitivity to dairy. Amazingly, as we took gluten out of her diet, her intestines began to heal, and she was able to tolerate some dairy. And so that's an interesting thing. So that real high dairy sensitivity went away.
Really?
Yeah, and it crops back up from time to time, but gluten's always been there.
Has she found that since she's had to cut that stuff out, that, it's almost like the reactions can get worse once you totally cut it out?
Yes, that's very true.
Okay.
Yes, because your body, I think, builds up kind of a bit of a tolerance to it. It's like it's ready to go, to fight that off, fight off that invader.
Yeah.
And then once you eliminate it, it's like your body kind of calms down, and it's good. And then once it gets reintroduced, it's like boom,
Yeah.
So no, we have seen that too. And I've spoken with some other people that have had issues like this, that they've said that too.
Yeah.
They've almost become more sensitive to that.
Well, their body's happy. It's like, wow, we're great. And then it introduces the toxin and it's like, oh, wow.
Yeah. So I don't know if maybe it's a mental thing too, is because you've kind of, once you're kind of in the trenches dealing with your health issue, you kind of, you're like, yeah, this is how I feel, and I can just deal with it. But once you get better, things get so much better. And then so maybe once that gets reintroduced, maybe it's not as severe, but it just feels that way because you've felt so good for so long.
I didn't think about it that way. That could be.
It. Yeah.
Well, I wish my sister were here because I had told you she went on the all meat diet.
Yeah.
And she said it was the best she's ever felt in her whole life. Like she could never lose weight. She was always like brain foggy. She had rashes. And then she did the all meat diet and she lost weight without even trying. And then her brain fog went away. Her rashes went away. And then, she did say she would eat something and her rash would come back. So she actually did see like a physical reaction whenever she did reintroduce something. So it was pretty. I wish she was here. She could have talked about it.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I've heard about some people going on that. In my mind, whatever diet you choose, because there's so many, which one is sustainable? What can you sustain in the long term? And will that diet still give you the nutrients that you need for health? Because, if you just go on a all potato diet or whatever, that's not even all diet.
I could do an all potato diet.
Potatoes are good.
I love French fries.
But the potato is going to give you a certain amount of nutrients, but it's not well-rounded. And so what you're going to end up in the long term, you're probably going to end up with some nutritional deficiencies. And I think that's what makes some diets so challenging. I think our bodies really are meant to have a wide variety. I think nutritionists could speak to that a lot better than I could, but a wide variety, different colors of vegetables and foods and grains and stuff is good for us in the long run.
Yeah, so back to your stuff.
Yes.
On a little tangent. So how important is it for a healthy diet, for people to have a healthy diet to help with the issues that you deal with?
Yeah,
again, I know you're not a nutritionist, but
right. I think a healthy diet, from what nutritionists have told us, the research that they do on this is that a healthy diet is just as important as getting good sleep. A healthy diet and getting the nutrients that you need is, just as important as reducing your stress and your worries. It's holistic. It's a holistic approach, right? And so even when it comes to physical therapy and dealing with pain and disorders, we need everything. We need good, well-balanced diet. We need good sleep. We need to deal with the mental component of stress and worries, and that might be related to their physical disability or pain. Might also be due to family issues, or friend issues, or work issues. We got to work through those issues. So I'm a big believer in the holistic approach to things. I try to incorporate little tidbits of all of that into my treatment approach as I'm dealing with the things that I'm most skilled and qualified to do with my patients.
I did have a question for you.
Sure.
I'm a little bit skeptical about chiropractics.
Okay.
So, I have never been to one that's actually done anything for me.
Okay.
So you let me know. What's your opinion?
Yeah.
Is it? I don't know.
Well, I tell you, so chiropractors and physical therapists, so physical therapists were within the medical model.
Okay.
Chiropractors, they kind of have their own model. And so the training that a chiropractor and a physical therapist are going to get, there's actually quite a bit of overlap in that training. But there are some key areas of divergence. And I don't want to speak for all chiropractors because I know that they have different schools of thought, just as physical therapists have different schools of thought and training.
You're being very kind.
Well, I know that they do some good work.
Yeah.
And I've spoken with many patients and get great benefit from them. I think some of the key things that what I've noticed will differentiate my practice from some chiropractic practice is that I'm very much engaged in empowering the patient. I want my patients to come into the clinic as little as possible. So I want to empower them with ways to heal their own body, to help manage their pain condition. That's not always the case with some chiropractors, where they will set up long duration plans where you come in to deal with that issue. In general, I don't think that's good for the patient, but like I said, not all chiropractors will do that. Many chiropractors do focus on joint health as kind of the key, the keystone for all health and pain disorders. Whereas physical therapists, we focus on the joints and getting the joints functioning correctly, moving and sliding correctly. But what about what surrounds the joints? The muscles. What is the condition of the muscles? Are they working correctly? Do we have what we call motor control issues? Are those muscles, human movement is so fascinating because we have signals going from the brain to the spinal cord to our extremities, all the way down to our fingertips, lightning fast, signals. And these muscles, they all work in conjunction with one another to give us stability and smooth movement. And when we have pain or joint-related issues, that gets all out of whack. And so what we have to do is we have to retrain those muscles. And so physical therapists are very focused on getting the joint, getting the pain better, but also working on the muscles. Chiropractic care doesn't focus on that as much. There's some chiropractors who do a great job at that. They bring in everything. Joint health plus therapeutic exercise. It's not the norm though. So those are some different things. Now
I see. I read between the lines.
One big thing that we do share is how we address joint dysfunction. And so joint dysfunction is any time, our joints are meant to work well, to get proper range of motion in our neck and our shoulders. Those joints have to slide and glide correctly. Sometimes they just get stuck. When they get stuck, it can cause pain, it can cause range of motion limits. And so what we got to do is get them unstuck. And so we both use manual therapy. Chiropractors, they tend to like to use manipulation, or what we call thrust mobilizations. That's where you get your back cracked,
Oh, yeah.
Physical therapists do
I mean,
that
it
too.
is nice.
Oh, it feels great. Feels great. And it works in a lot of situations. It doesn't work for everything, though.
Yeah.
And so you have to... So I'll use that in my practice, I'll manipulate the lumbar spine, the extremities, thoracic spine. I just do mobilizations. I don't thrust at the neck. But that works really well. And so that's what we share is that, we're popping spines and popping extremities to get that working. But I'm going to do that for a certain amount of time, and then I'm going to focus on other things. Whereas some chiropractic models, they focus on that every visit. They're doing that.
Okay.
Just based off, how they're trained.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how important do you think movement is to healing the body?
It's huge.
And not even with, maybe you can speak to this, maybe you would understand it's not skeletal or muscular, but whenever I had my surgery and they did that intestine surgery, the bowel resection, I'm in there a couple days and, just fresh getting my intestines cut off and put back together.
Yeah.
And they're telling me, get up and walk.
Yes.
And I'm like,
Easier said than done, huh?
It actually wasn't that hard, shockingly.
That's good.
Well, shocking, I had just lost 3 feet plus of my intestines. They cut the tumor out my appendix. I hadn't eaten. I don't think I could eat for 4 days.
Yeah.
And I couldn't drink, so they just made me slob.
Oh.
So I was just,
Just giving you bowel rest, yeah.
Yeah, until they slowly woke my bowels up. But I think it was like 3 or 4 days of just swabbing my mouth because, my mouth would get dry.
Gotta have something, yeah.
Yeah, and it was shocking. They're telling me in like 2 days after this major surgery, get up and walk. And I would walk around. I'd go out there and I'd walk. And even the next day, I'm walking more and walking more. And, and I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
And, they're telling me that your body heals faster with movement.
Absolutely.
So can you, I know that's not your field of medicine, but can you speak to that?
Well, I mean, even when, my practice is largely in the outpatient clinic, but I've worked in the hospitals, and physicians very much, they want their patients out of bed. And there's a number of reasons for that. One is that, you lay in bed for too long, especially post-surgical, you can develop blood clots, and then you get a blood clot that goes to the lungs that can even lead to death, pulmonary embolism. So physicians and nurses are very wise to want those patients out of bed as soon as possible. So that's key, and it has movement and activity has an effect on the bowels. It does get moving. I mean, anybody who's exercised, done any vigorous exercise, it gets things moving.
That's true.
And so I can see how they would want you to do that to wake up the bowels.
But in your field, how is it?
Exercise in general your body has to have it.
Yeah,
absolutely has to have it. And if you look into the literature on the health effects of exercise, they're numerous, and they go into several different areas. They go into areas of how exercise benefits people with pain conditions, how it affects cardiovascular health, pulmonary related issues, mental health. There's a lot of evidence out there showing how exercise affects our mood. And it can also be used to treat clinical conditions like depression and anxiety. Not fully as a component of care, but there's something that there's a lot of things that happen during physical exercise as we stir up the blood in our body. As our heart starts beating faster, we start getting circulation to our limbs. It literally makes your body start releasing healing factors. In physical therapy, when I'm dealing with patients with pain, I'm getting them moving, okay? And a lot of times their pain condition has kept them from moving. So my job is as I'm treating that pain condition, okay, that's preventing this person from going about their daily life, what are some safe ways that I can get their heart beating, that I can get them exercising? Because when you contract your muscles, when you lift weights, when you do aerobic exercise, when you walk, or walk fast, jog, or whatever, your body releases natural pain relievers.
Such as?
Endorphins, norepinephrine, so forth. Those get released just naturally, called natural opioids. and so we want
the natural ones.
The natural ones, yeah. And that's why, if you go to the gym, and you just don't completely, do too much, you tend to feel good. You feel a little tired. You generally feel good. It's because exercise has a pain relieving effect. And so I want my patients getting back to their normal daily life plus some, if possible, to help with their general health and their pain conditions. So lots of factors. So you have when you exercise, serotonin gets released, and that's how it can help us both with pain and stress and worry, even some depression. What we've dealt with in this country and worldwide over the past few years has just been devastating on the mental health of people. Not only has the social isolation affected people, but also the lack of people wanting to get out of the house. Gyms have closed down. It keeps people from doing their normal exercise routine. That has all had huge secondary effects on our population that we still haven't seen all the effects of that.
Have you seen it in your practice though?
No, I've seen it just living life, talking with people, reading news articles and stuff like that, you see that. You see how just this season has aged people, you know.
I know.
I mean, I don't know
True.
if you've noticed that. There are certain people in my life that just generally look like they've aged, you know, 5-10 years over the past 2 years. And I think a lot of that comes from not only stress and worry, you know, poor sleep, but also social isolation and lack of normal physical activity. All those work together, you know, and affects our health. So but back to your question, exercise, it's key. You know, some recommendations on exercise just released to the general public is to get at least 3 hours of moderate exercise per week. Okay, more is not always better, but you can do more than that.
Yeah, depending on the person.
Yeah. So aerobic exercise, which could just be a fast walk, anything that's going to get your heart beating faster. You know, you don't want to take a leisurely walk, although that has some health benefits. It's not very good. It's not going to help your cardiovascular system as much. So get out there, push yourself out, beyond your normal walking pace, get that heart elevated, and then do some type of resistive exercise. You know? And you don't have to have a gym membership to do that. You can have some weights just around your house, some dumbbells. You can do a lot of exercises, bands. Resistive exercise is good for bone health as well, to keep our bones strong.
Oh, is it? It helps your bones?
Very much.
I did not know that.
Yeah, so bones, in order to keep bones strong, especially for women that are post-menopause, it's very important to maintain bone health. And so you achieve that through weight-bearing exercise, which is walking, jogging, climbing stairs, stuff like that, but also resistive exercises. When I say resistive, I mean, you know, those bands, dumbbells, you know, anything like that, because our muscles attach to our bones. And so our bones respond to stresses on them by sending more calcium to the area to make it strong, so it can withstand those loads.
Yeah, and answer this for me. You know, I'm getting older. I'm not dead. But I crossed my 30s.
You're younger than me, though. No, you're good.
Just barely. But, you know, I lift weights, and it of course makes me feel better all the way around. But during our son's baseball season, I haven't been able to do it as much because, well, there's baseball going on all the time.
Yes.
And I have noticed that things hurt worse.
You noticed that, don't you? Yeah.
I gave my dog a bath yesterday, and I haven't recovered.
Oh my, okay.
Like my lower...
I'll give you some advice.
You're like, maybe you have a problem.
I don't know, giving a dog a bath, that's, you know, you're leaning forward for long periods of time. If they're not a good dog, you know, they're unruly, you know. I mean, what dogs like baths, you know?
I mean, it was like my legs were shaking. I was like, God.
Yeah.
You know, and like right here all hurts and my lower back hurts. And so why is it that whenever you are in doing some sort of forward movement and then you stop, it's almost worse. Almost like we talked about whenever you do an elimination diet and then you introduce something back. Like, I'm not kidding. I was like, did I feel this bad whenever I didn't work out?
Right.
You know?
Well, it's something about, you know, whenever you are you're exercising, you know, you're using those muscles, right? So those muscles become conditioned to those stresses and those loads, and so they can handle that, you know. But yeah, when you get away from that, our body has a tendency to conserve, you know.
Yeah.
So it's just like, you know, going back to what you talked about with, you know, how physicians want to get their patients out of bed in the hospital. You know, bed rest, just laying on a bed, your body, within 24 hours, your body starts breaking down muscle tissue. Because muscle tissue is challenging to maintain. You know, and you've probably seen this in weightlifters who get out of their routine, they kind of deflate.
I feel like I deflated. I can't even give my dog a bath.
Yeah, and so those muscles, you know, if they're not being tested, they're gonna start relaxing. They're like, hey, we don't need all this extra protein. Let's get rid of it. It's too, you know, it takes too much energy to maintain and so forth. Well, and so you get out of that routine. You're like, okay, well, I used to be able to do stuff like this. I used to be able to run and jump or play basketball or give my dog a bath without any issues. And then you go in there and you start trying to use those muscles like you used to, and they don't quite cooperate as well. They get sore a lot easier.
Yeah. And it feels like I had a full 2 hours at the gym.
Yeah. Athletes will notice this. Athletes that, let's say a high school athlete, they're, if you're a high school football player, you're going to be in the weight room several days a week. You're going to be training those muscles, your joints. All of those things are getting used to those type of stresses. Mm-hmm. But what happens when you're no longer a high school athlete? You're now maybe going to college, or you go and you're working someplace and you're not really physically active. A year later, your friend calls you and says, "Hey, you want to come play football, flag football?" And you're like, "Oh yeah, I used to play football. I'm game."
Yeah.
I haven't been in the gym for an entire year. You go out there, you're going to be getting muscle strains. Yeah. You're going to feel like death afterwards. And the reason why is because your body is no longer in that mode.
Yeah.
And so you got to keep. That's why just regular exercise, regular dosing keeps you fit for most things in life.
And so do you think doing like a mixture of some sort of cardio and strength training is the best way to go for most people?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's so many people that can speak to this. Personal trainers, have their own preferences on the routines and so forth. Me personally, I don't like being in the gym. I really don't like it, but I do it because I know all the beneficial effects of that. So when I go to the gym, I will be in there for 45 minutes, and it is essentially a cardio workout the entire time. Mm-hmm. And so what do I mean? Do I just get on a treadmill and run? No. I'm doing resistive exercises. I'm using free weights, or I'm doing dips, or I'm doing pull-ups. But the rest breaks in between those sets are very minimal. Short.
Yeah, okay.
And so what I'll do is, if I'm challenging my biceps and my pecs with one exercise, well, since I'm going to have a short duration of rest before I get to my next exercise, I'm going to give those a little rest. I'm going to work the back part of my body, my triceps or my scapular muscles or my lats. Mm-hmm. And so even though these are still somewhat active during those exercises, they're not the main movers. Mm-hmm. But by doing that, just one after another, my heart's beating the whole time. Mm-hmm. So I'm getting a good aerobic exercise and resistive exercise. So it seems very efficient for me. I'm not saying that's the way.
Yeah.
Everybody's got to do it. Some people might not be able to tolerate that.
Do you do like high reps?
It keeps me in good health.
Yeah.
The 10 rep max is, I think it's just gold.
Yeah.
I love the 10 rep.
That's me too. I'm not doing more than 10.
Yeah. As a general rule, if you want to build muscle bulk, you're going to use lower reps and higher resistance. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you're working on more endurance on muscles, then you're going to use higher reps.
Yeah.
15, 20 rep max. That could go right in between.
Mm-hmm.
Just personal preference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I do. It's roughly your classic. I'll change it up every so often. Like I'll lower the reps and like kick up the weight just for me to try to, if I'm stuck somewhere, that's what I'll do just so I can get back up. But for the most part, it's, the 3 sets, 10 reps. And I'm pretty good with that. I'll steadily climb. Not right now. I can't give my dog a bath.
Can't do it. You'll get back to it. That's the thing. You'll be able to get back to it. You got to ease yourself back into it.
Yeah, and it hasn't been too long. And, the crazy thing that I've noticed is that, I don't know if it's just my body type, but I can bounce back incredibly quickly and get back to where I was in less than half the time.
Yeah.
And
you've probably got 2 factors going for you there. It's your youth, and then also your...
Oh, thank you. I was starting to believe I didn't have it anymore.
And what you choose to eat,
Yeah.
So in general, you got other aspects of your life online, and good in favor of it. So you can jump right back into it.
Yeah, well, that made me feel great. I'm 31, for a girl. Once we hit 30, we're like, whoa.
It won't always be like that, Unfortunately, time takes a toll on all of us.
Yeah.
No matter how well we eat or how physically active.
Not men.
We all have an expiration date.
Men are like fine wine. It's true. Like women, it's just not that way, but man, y'all get older and it's like you get silver hair and y'all start looking better, so y'all can't even.
Maybe.
It's true. Like my husband, he's silver headed, and one time he has like brown hair naturally, like you. Like, so whenever he was younger, it was brown, and then one day he went and got his hair cut. And his little hair lady put like some fake brown in there. I said, take it out.
It didn't look right, huh?
It didn't look right.
It doesn't always look right. Yeah, you can kind of spot those.
Yeah, you can spot it. I was like, no, just take it out. Yeah. You know, I was like, all the ladies think you're a silver fox. Just own it. You know. Yeah.
Our physical health is so important. In my mind, I'm going to try to maintain that as long as I can. My big thing is always the mental health. You know, my cognitive functions. That's what I want to maintain. Definitely. You know, and amazingly, to help maintain your cognitive functions, genetics does play a role, but exercise. Exercise is good for our cognition. It helps. Just as we get more blood flow to our muscles, we get more blood flow to our brain when we exercise. And then also, giving it the right amount of, intellectual curiosity, continuing to learn, never giving that brain a rest. Not in a neurotic way, but, that's good. That's good for you, But that's what I try to focus on. Yeah.
So we're going to switch topics now, because you kind of give me a little bit of a segue.
Sure.
So, constantly learning, doing new things. Your mission trip.
Yes.
How was that?
Yes. So I went on a mission trip to Ethiopia, to the capital, Addis, and also to a country that's not incredibly safe to go to, Somalia. And so I did go there, because we had the lady who, she has a organization called Believe in His Name, and she had some contacts that contacted her and said, hey, would you like to take part in a well drilling project? She said, well, tell me more about it. And
so how did you find out about it?
So this is a lady that I do ministry with on a regular basis.
Okay.
Yeah, great lady, and she's had this organization. She's been to numerous countries, so she's like a well-traveled lady. I'm not very well-traveled, but she wanted me to come along, and I prayed about it and felt led to do that.
You were the chosen one.
I was one of the chosen. There's two others that went with us. So there's a team of 4. But Somalia is really having a tough time with drought over the past 3 or 4 years. This drought stricken. The rivers are literally drying up. And then they got another thing on top of it. Not only is drought bad for food supply, but they receive most of their grain from Ukraine. And we know what's going on in Ukraine and Russia right now. And a lot of that grain that Ukraine produces is going to be going offline because of the war. And so they're really in a tough spot. And so we learned that there is a village that was in desperate need of water, and so I was invited to join this team to go first to Ethiopia, where she has another mission I'll tell you about in a second, and then we kind of went there, and then we went into Somalia and started the process of getting a well. And this is a large project, tens of thousands of dollars, a well drilled for these people.
Wow!
Literally, it's going to be life and death for them. And for their crops and also their herds and stuff.
Really?
And so the Somali officials that we dealt with were so welcoming to us, so thankful for us to be there.
Really?
But it is.
Were y'all nervous though?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
We know that going into a place like that, your life could very well be on the line.
Yeah.
There's a terrorist group in that country that causes all kinds of havoc for the government and the people. They're affiliated with Al Qaeda, and if we ran across them, they would not have been friendly to us. Let's just say that.
Yeah.
So anywhere we went,
did y'all have to sign waivers in case?
No waivers, but it was. I mean, it is a rule that you have armed guards with you.
Wow.
And so
okay.
we had guys with machine guns guarding us the places we went, and just generally bit of a dangerous place.
Mm-hmm.
Things are starting to come back online there. They're making progress. As I've talked with people that were in the government and also just the general population, there's a lot of hope.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of hope for Somalia, but they got a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
Got a lot of work to do. And I know the U.S. government's helping them out militarily and intelligence-wise, which is good. But yeah, that was a good trip. We're there for 5 days,
Mm-hmm.
and great Somali food's delicious.
Oh, really?
Yeah, didn't have any issues with that.
Yeah.
A lot of rice, fish,
Mm-hmm.
Chicken is good.
So you ate well while you were there.
We ate well over there.
Cool.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think another thing is, we're going to help people, but we also bear the name of Christ with us,
Mm-hmm.
and everybody that we met knew that, and so
Aww.
we got to help establish a project that's going to help with water drilling, but we also got to carry the love and the peace of Christ with us,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's impactful
Yeah.
for those people as well.
Yeah, I wondered about that. Like, do you go and do you preach, you could say, to people? Or it's just like,
No.
that's
Can't
what
do that in that country.
Because I've always wanted to do some sort of mission trip, and I was like, I would be a horrible preacher.
Yeah.
I wouldn't know how to tell people, hey, I'm here for Jesus.
Right.
It'd be so
Right.
bad. So that's cool that you just,
Well,
as you said, bared his name, and that was enough for people.
There's some people that preach Christ well, but they don't represent him well.
Oh, I love that.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so it's dynamic, and
Mm-hmm.
you follow the ways of Christ. Look what Christ did. Is not only did he teach about the kingdom of God,
Mm-hmm.
and the way to the Father in heaven, the way to salvation, but he also shared love and kindness with the least of these in this
Mm-hmm.
world. Mostly the despised and the rejected ones,
Mm-hmm.
the lepers and the adulterous woman and the prostitutes. And he showed kindness and favor to them
Mm-hmm.
when they were at a point in their heart where they were willing to go a different direction.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the other part of the Christian message is of love.
Mm-hmm.
Apostle Paul said, you can surrender you can be an eloquent speaker, you can surrender your bodies to the flames, you can give all you have to the poor, but if you don't have love, you gain nothing.
Mm-hmm.
You gain nothing. And so love underpins the Christian message.
Mm-hmm.
And so it can't just be preaching.
Mm-hmm.
It also has to be those actions. And so in Somalia, no, you don't preach you don't preach widely and openly.
Mm-hmm.
You can share with those closest to you, but evangelism has to be more showing the love of Christ,
Mm-hmm.
the kindness of Christ, and for them to know that we're there in His name, even though we weren't preaching it.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
Oh, I mean,
Yeah.
I actually really love what you just said, because I have struggled with that so much growing up. I shared with you a little bit about how whenever I was younger, I wasn't somebody who could just believe.
Mm-hmm.
It just didn't come naturally to me. I don't know if it's like a rational brain, but reason. I had to be brought in with reason.
Sure.
Semi, It's
Right.
like I couldn't join the league without sufficient evidence.
Right.
You could say.
That's understandable. Yeah.
And I really struggled coming on board when I would see people saying, I am something, but going and living something different, because it's, for me, it was always like, you can't claim to be something if your actions don't align. That's like saying, I'm afraid of sticking my hand in a hot flame, but you still do it over and over again. It's like, okay, well, you obviously aren't, claiming what you say you are.
Right.
So I really like that you guys came in and led through actions, because that's the higher calling over words every single time. You're always going to see the people who are the light. You just know who they are.
Yeah, you can see
when
it.
you see those people.
Right.
You can see the people at church and you're like, you're not the one. But you can see somebody out in every day and you just know they're the light.
Right.
And so I find that really awesome you guys were that.
Christians, they carry the message within them, and not pointing to themselves, but they're pointing to a man, the man Christ Jesus. Christians, and I don't know if you know this fact, but early on, after Christ had ascended into heaven, now the weight of the gospel was put on the disciples to spread. They're initially called members of the way, because Christ had taught the way to the Father, and so they were followers of the way. And it wasn't until, I believe it was in the city of Antioch, that they started to be called Christians. And they were called Christians because they resembled Christ. And that's the call of Christians. The call of becoming a Christian is not to be perfect, or to never fall, or to never be a hypocrite. Because I think we're all hypocrites at times, and we all fall just because we struggle, right? But it's to be Christ-like, and it's to strive to be Christ-like. And so, what is Christ-like? Well, read the Gospels. Look how Jesus interacted with people. He spoke truth to power. He wasn't just mild and meek always. He was a very strong man who spoke truth to power. The Pharisees and the Sadducees that weren't doing right, but man, was he gentle and loving at the same time. And so that's the call of Christians, is to emulate that and to not do it in your own strength. Thank goodness we have a helper. Anyone who's made the good profession, scriptures say that you will be embodied by the Holy Spirit. That Holy Spirit is your helper and will guide you along that path. But it's a journey, it's a journey.
Yeah. What you said there struck me as well, talking about how we all struggle. We all have our faults. We're all hypocrites. We're all liars. We're all thieves. We're all everything that we don't want to be.
Yeah.
And for me, that was another huge tipping point for me, because people would always ask me, "Are you a Christian?" And I would say yes, because I didn't want to get in trouble. Get in trouble, or be shamed.
Oh, shamed. Yeah,
or get in trouble.
I'm
from Channing. If you didn't say, you were like, one time I had questions in church, and apparently they weren't the right questions.
That's a shame too. Yeah, you should be able to ask questions.
Well, my teacher, she looked at me, my Bible school teacher, and she said, "Brooke, are you a Christian or not?" And I was like, "Yes." And in my heart, I just wasn't, and I just had questions. But, I've always struggled with saying I'm a believer, because to me, it's like, what would a true believer do if you went all in? You personally, everybody is different.
Yeah,
I understand that, but if you really went all in, what would true belief look like?
Yeah,
and you talked about just now how everybody has their sins, or I think it's in Greek, it means to miss the mark. So everybody misses the mark. But there's this story, whenever I heard this interpretation, it changed for me. It's when Jacob wrestles God.
Right.
And they say the people that are closest to God wrestle with him. It's not always on the path. If you're always on the path, you have to look at, why are you being dishonest?
Yeah.
Are you doing things are you just doing it out of shame? Like, what is the reason? But it's a constant wrestling match. And they say that even with marriages. The best marriages are a wrestling match. It's the husband and wife, one not dominating, but it's that push and pull.
In a healthy way, right?
Yes, not a toxic way, obviously. But, that helped me be able to think, maybe I am something. I can't even define it. I'm too I'm a weird person, but to know that I wrestle with God for me is enough to know that maybe my soul isn't damned.
Yeah. And the beauty of the message of Christ is that you cannot make yourself right with God. You can't earn your salvation. As a matter of fact, one sin will keep you out of the kingdom of heaven forever. We are all in desperate need of a Savior. And that's what Christ did. And so Christ came and he bore the penalty of our sin on the cross. And that covers my sin past, present, and future. And so you're like, oh, well, that's too easy, right? You gotta, because a lot of faiths, you have to, a lot of the Muslims I spoke to in Somalia, they'd say, on Judgment Day, we don't know if we're going to go to heaven or not. Our good deeds have to outweigh your bad. And I said, well, how do you know if your good deeds do outweigh your bad? Well, we don't really know. Well, I'm not in any better situation. I'm full of sin. My past, even if I live the rest of my life perfect, okay, which is not going to happen, I still got a lot of sin to deal with. Thanks be to God, Christ bore that on the cross for us because he knew that we couldn't make up for all of our sin ourselves. And so he made the way. And so what does he say? He says, come, receive this gift I want to give you, the gift of grace and mercy. And come, I'm going to teach you how to live a new life, right? The Apostle Paul, he says, anyone who's in Christ is a new creation. The old is gone, the new has come. Doesn't mean you're perfect. It's a period of growth, But it's learning to, the Christian life is learning to fully accept Jesus as your Savior, meaning that he truly did pay for all your sins and that you don't have to do anything else but receive it. And then the other one, Jesus is Lord, because he's got to be both. He can't just be one or the other. It's got to be both, Savior and Lord. And the process of Lord is probably where that wrestling comes in, because you're like, I don't think so. I want to be the king of my life. I want to do what I want to do, right? That's what our hearts tell us sometimes.
For me, it's more of a belief thing, because I'm very spiritual, but my reason can take over that materialistic side, and not in the fact that I love stuff, but it's wanting a scientific answer for everything. And like, if I don't have the scientific answer, there's always a bit of doubt, or answering the questions about suffering in this world.
Oh, that's a big one, isn't it?
It's answering the classic questions that all atheists need answers to. It's like, why doesn't God come down and strike all the rapists in the world, and those
he will, just not now.
There's your answer, huh?
And it goes deeper than that.
Yeah.
I think questions are good, and I think that the Christians should and it's tough for some Christians, maybe like your teacher, because they don't always have the answers. But instead of responding in a harsh way or saying, why can't you just believe? You say, you know what? I'm going to help you find that answer. I'm going to find somebody who's more gifted at this to find that, because there are a lot of questions. But science has its limitations. And science doesn't have the answer to everything either. Science can explain. Right now, scientists believe, it's a general consensus that everything started with some type of Big Bang. You've heard of the Big Bang, right? That from a singularity, everything came into being, right? And somehow everything formed really nicely on this earth, and we have intelligent life. We have our genes, our DNA, which is just too much for me to believe that kind of all fell together personally. But science still has a limitation, because they can't explain, well, what was on the other side of that Big Bang? In what space did this Big Bang occur in? Where did the material that set that off come from? And as a person of faith, I don't know all those answers, but I do know, and I do believe in a creator, God, who exists outside of his creation, who very well might have chosen that method to start everything. And then whatever else happened in between, I don't know. I know he's the source of all life, though. And so that's how I've wrestled with that. And especially, going to college and being in the sciences, it's like, it's an atheistic worldview that's being taught you, even here in Texas.
You're just jumping right in,
You're jumping in, and I had to, go through classes where you're learning about how everything evolved and how it just evolved on its own. And it's just, I'm just like, no, I don't believe that, that it did it on its own. Was a creator guiding it through? Yes. Yeah, if it happened that way, then the creator was guiding it through. But maybe it didn't even happen that way, because science, we learn that what we think we know and we so adamantly stand on can be repealed with more evidence later on.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the real challenge of, kind of the follow the science type mentality. It's like, yeah, in general we should do that, but we have to be very humble as we follow the science, because science fails us very often. I'm in the scientific field.
Yeah. Well, I heard a really good quote the other day, and it said, science and religion oppose each other, but they oppose each other. Hold on, listen. Hold on. But they oppose each other the way that your thumb and index finger oppose each other. And whenever they touch, that's where you can grasp everything.
Yeah.
And whenever I heard that, I was like,
that's pretty good.
That makes sense.
Right.
They do oppose each other in some ways. It's, spirituality and reason, and can't, necessarily entangle the two. But whenever they touch, that's where everything comes together.
That's right.
I don't know.
And we're all spiritual beings. I mean, I don't meet a lot of people that, when they get taken away from the distractions of this world, don't sit there and think about some of the biggest questions in life. Who am I? Where did I come from? Where am I going to go when I die? These are big questions that, with the busyness of life, we kind of get distracted from those. But there's something inside of us that is spiritual that wants to know that. We're seeking out those things, and sometimes we don't have the answer, so we try to find fulfillment in all this world has to offer us.
Yeah.
Only knowing that lasts. The fulfillment that we get from that is only short term. And we always got to have more of it. So yeah, there's a spiritual searching in everybody, because we're spiritual beings, right? We're not just flesh and bones. We have a soul, we have a spirit inside of us.
Yeah.
Yeah, that gravitates towards all these different things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like even when I was 4, I'm watching everybody in church like, what the heck is going on here? I don't know why. I'm just a weird person, but,
I'm glad you're asking those questions as a young person.
I used to be really afraid of it, because,
right.
And whenever you're a little kid and you're that one, and I unfortunately was the one who couldn't just look around and be like, oh, okay, I have to believe everything. It made me feel really awful about myself. And that's the one thing I wish religion wouldn't do, because truthfully, we don't know if there's like a literal hell or not. There's different interpretations. But whenever you're that little kid and you're the one who can't believe no matter how hard you try, and whatever, and you're thinking you're going to go to hell, and there's something really wrong with you.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, there's the argument for predestination. There's, well, why can't you just be a good kid and a non-sinner? And you're like, look, I'm really trying here.
Yeah.
But, there's some light bulb that won't go off. And people are like, you just have to believe. You just whatever. And if you're that little kid like me that just can't do it, I lived with this thing in me that there was something really wrong with me. And that led me towards some bad paths, because I thought that, if there's something wrong with you, then you're going to make bad choices, or you're going to get involved with people who just tell you, yeah, that's true. And so for me, I just wish religion would be a little bit more accepting of the questions. And, at least people around here, like, look, that's okay.
Yeah.
Come and get your questions answered. If you need to go look at something else to decipher, okay, but be wary. There's bad things out there that will try to manipulate you, and it seems like we've gotten away from that.
Right. Well, it kind of goes back to, and I'll speak to the Christian viewpoint. But, look at Christ himself. He was asked all kinds of questions, and he answered them, right? He didn't turn people away. He didn't turn people away that were seeking forgiveness, and he didn't turn away people that were seeking answers to their questions. Now, he did want them to approach in faith, right? And he would get on his disciples from time to time of their lack of faith. You know, and
it's like I'm right here.
And so that's real.
Can't believe
you know, it's like, you know, he just feeds a crowd of 5,000 people with, you know, with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, and then, you know, days later, you know, they don't have any bread, and the disciples are getting worried about gathering bread. And he's like, "Did you not just see what I just did?" You know, it's like, where's your faith? You know, so don't we see ourselves in the disciples? You know, but there is one who has answers, and sometimes the answers are not as complete as we want them, but they are complete and they are sufficient. And to tell you the truth, things, why things are the way they are, and the answers to all of our questions are probably so grand that we probably can't even comprehend it, even if God wanted to deliver that to us.
Yeah, I've even thought
Have you thought about that?
Well, I've actually thought, like, if God appeared to me right now, I would put myself in an institution. Like, if God came down and he was like, "Brooke," I'd be like, "Wow, I am insane."
Yeah.
You know, so I feel what you're saying. It's like, even if he could do everything in the world and we would still not be able to comprehend it, couldn't believe it. And there's a saying, you know, I believe in the stories of the Bible, and I do. Yeah. However, I also don't discount other religions that say the same thing. Because there's a saying that goes, all truth is God's truth. Yeah. You know, I'm the way, the truth, and the light. Truth points to goodness and God. And so if different types of religions, maybe it's Buddhism that says the same thing as Christianity, maybe in a slightly different way, but that's a truth, and that points you to God, and maybe there's a different version. So one is love your neighbor, love is speak the truth in love, you know, but if they're all pointing to the same thing, then you can't discount certain things. Yes, you can't. Right. You always have to pursue that.
And that's I totally agree with your statement. I forget who said that. All truth is God's truth. And I believe that. And you look at different faiths, and when the truths line up, it's like, well, you know, because Buddhism or Hinduism, because they say this, you know, and it agrees with what Christians say, is this no longer truth? They're like, no, it is truth, right? It's God's truth. Yeah. The key is, you know, where do they differ on not the minor things, on just, you know, how do we approach God, but on the really key factors.
And that's kind of what I think about with God. It's like he would be bigger and greater than any one religion could completely depict. It's like you could get part of the story and maybe most of the story from somewhere, but there's another place that has a different part of the story. And then intersecting every single truth that you can possibly find, and that's how great God would be, in my humble opinion.
Well, you know, think about this, is, you know, and some questions that, you know, I'll ask people at times, you know, as they're exploring these things. I'll say, do you believe in a creator of all things, or do you know, because you either believe in a creator or you believe everything just kind of happened to come into being, right? And I still think that's a logical leap to go.
I believe in some forms of evolution. However, I can't make my mind skip from like bacteria to monkey.
You got the macroevolution versus the microevolution, right? Microevolution is apparent, right? Which is why when I went to Somalia, they have black skin and I have white skin. Because our ancestors lived in different places. That's microevolution. Because we all came from, you know, a common ancestor, Adam and Eve. But yeah, so, you know, is there a creator? And most people in their hearts of hearts are not atheists, you know, where they absolutely don't believe in a creator.
Or they don't act like they are.
They might act like it, but
no, they don't.
Most people believe in a creator. I would say, in my experience.
I would say that most people act like they believe in God. They just don't know they do. Okay. Because if you didn't believe in something, then you would have to say that we all just evolved. I mean, you would have to go that route. You would have to go down that route, and the only reason we ever do anything is to provide our offspring with a better life or whatever. But
it's a very selfish lifestyle potentially.
Yes, and you can say, oh well, we've come up with rules so that if you act better you survive in society. Like I've listened to all the arguments, but at the end of the day, if I were to treat you like you weren't a divine, sovereign individual, you would want nothing to do with me. If I did that to your kids, you would write me off. You'd call me a sociopath. If I were to just be like, well, I'm done with you, you're of no use, whatever. But we all treat each other like there's a spark of divinity. And if you lost your kids today, you wouldn't be saying, oh, my lineage is gone. Right. You would be shattered.
They have more value.
Yes.
They have intrinsic value.
Yes.
Right.
And so for me, it's like if you're an atheist, you got to go a certain route, but you don't act like that's the route you take. Hardly anybody does. And if we did, we have names for those people. We put them in jail. We're like, no.
That worldview, if it was lived out, yes, it could end up like that potentially. And and that's I think atheists at times will be like, are you really saying that because I'm an atheist I'm not a good person?
No,
not at all. Not at all. Well, you'd be a very decent person. But when you dig into the worldview and meaning, you could see very well how people from that worldview, it's like, well, if this is all there is, then really, you have license to live however you want, irrespective of other people.
Yeah, you don't have to treat people.
Thank goodness that we don't see a lot of that, but there's some out in the world. If there's a creator, why did that creator create things? Why did he give us personalities? Why did he give us, there's something in us that are, looking up at the star, our ancestors looked up at the stars, the millions of stars in the sky, and they came up with, they're looking for answers, right? Sometimes they come up with their own myths and stuff like that. But something inside of us is curious about our being and of nature and stuff like that. So if there's a creator, and he created that within us, you think that creator wanted us to know about him, and what kind of creator would that be? I'll ask people sometimes, if there was a creator, do you think this is a creator full of wrath and hate, or do you think he is a creator of love? I don't meet a lot of people that don't say love. I don't know what it is inside of us that maybe that's just what we want in our creator, but most people will go towards that versus an angry God.
I would say if you're going to go the other route, you would have become very nihilistic, and you become nihilistic from having no faith or hope or belief in anything, which is the atheist mantra at the heart of it, because there's no meaning, no true meaning.
Right.
And so if you're...
It's a scary world when there's no meaning, right? If it's a God of love, then, we love people around us, and because of our love, we seek relationship with them. If God is a God of love, it's not a far stretch to think that he would want to be involved with his creation. We see that in a lot of religions. We see God interacting with mankind. And
How so?
Well, if you read the text, we see, even going back to the Greek gods, how the Greek gods would come and interact, with mankind in different ways. Not always
smite them
in kind ways. Yes, I know. We don't see that love coming up as much there, but you think a God of love would seek out a relationship. Would a creator want to be known? The scriptures say that the heavens declare the glory of God, and the skies proclaim the work of his hands. What is created is evidence for the creator of God. He's made it so that we don't look in the sky and say, yeah, we probably just exist on our own, right? No, we search beyond ourselves, right? And that's what most of mankind has done in one way or another. But if this God is a God of love and wants relationship, he'd want to be known. If he'd want to be known, how would he communicate? And so how would he communicate with us? And if you look at the Christian faith, which comes straight out of the Jewish faith, out of Judaism, we see a God communicating with his creation, whether it's through Noah or it's through the prophets or through Moses. He's creating because he loves his creation. And he also makes clear the major problem that we have between the created and the creator, and that's sin. And sin takes a central role both in Old and New Testament teachings. And so we see a God that is seeking to restore that relationship that's been broken by sin. And he did that in many ways, and he did it finally, ultimately, through his Son, which was God in the flesh. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us, and showed us not only the way to God, the truth, right? But he showed us how to become reconciled, and he answered those big questions that we all ask. It's there in the Scriptures. So I think truth is held within the Scriptures because a God, a creator of all things, who is a God of love, who is a God that seeks relationship, he would have to make that known, right? He couldn't just, I don't see how this God would just want to sit back and just let things play out. Although there have been some, I think deism's kind of like that, but that's nobody's a deist really anymore.
Yeah, I've thought about deism just whenever I was looking at the argument for suffering, but then it just didn't really align. I was like, I'm going to write this one off.
Suffering is a very challenging thing, but the one hope that we have is that suffering won't always last, and that though we have bodies that may live 20 years, 30 years, maybe a full life expectancy, that in comparison to eternity is just a flash.
I have a trick question for you, though.
Sure.
Okay. So, I have my own thoughts. Okay. But what would you say about somebody who went through the concentration camps and lived a life full of misery and suffering and torture, and at the end of it all, they said, you know what, God, go to hell. Because I have watched children die. I have watched people be tortured.
Yeah.
What would you say in regards to their soul?
In regards to their soul?
Their eternal soul, because they went through all the suffering, and then at the bitter end they said, you know what, God, go to hell. Because
of the suffering. Yeah.
Because this is bullshit.
How could you let me go through this?
Anyone. How could you let kids go through this? How could you do that? What?
Suffering has been part of the human existence from the very beginning. Looking at in the book of Genesis, we see the first murder. It was shortly after the creation, not long after the creation, and it was Cain and Abel, or Cain murdered his brother because he was righteous, and God looked in favor upon him. And so we see that repeated throughout the pages of history, and the result of such a demeanor has caused murder and strife and concentration camps and so forth. And I've never had to go through that suffering, and so it's hard for me to even judge a person that would say, go to hell or whatever, or just totally write off God.
But you could see how it could happen.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And it probably has happened. I know this. This is what I know. I know one is that God's a God of mercy, and he's God of love. And so ultimately when it has to do with that person's eternal destination, I don't make any judgments. Okay? I know what Christ said, and I take that to heart. But the ultimate questions of where that person goes is not up to me. It's up to God. I know that person, that they had the same problem that I have, and that's that my sin separates me from God, and a holy God, and that I need to have that relationship reconciled. I need my sin to be washed clean, just as that person needs their sin to be washed clean. And the source of that is Christ and his sacrifice. Now, how all that works out, I don't know. I'll take Christ at his word, that he says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. And so I'll take him at his word, and I'll let him sort out only the things that God can sort out. Another thing I know is that this God that people tend to get angry with in times of suffering, he's not distant from our suffering. And he actually experienced it himself. And that's the beautiful thing about the gospel, is that the Word became flesh. The Word was with God, and the Word was God, and the Word took on flesh in the form of Jesus Christ. And you're like, okay, well, if God's going to take on the flesh, he's going to live a good life, right? It's like, no, look how Christ entered the world. He didn't enter the world in pomp, in great celebration, or in wealth. No, he was born from people from Nazareth, which was a little podunk town in Galilee. Not a place known for wealth or prestige. And he was born to people that were from Mary, who was already having all kinds of problems with her family. Because she's pregnant and she's claiming that she was not with a man. And,
stone her, right?
Yeah. And so, and he was born in a stable, placed in a manger, with a lot of farm animals in attendance. And then God, he chose to make his announcement of Christ coming into the world to shepherd some of the loneliest people in that society, and despised, because they're out there with the sheep, smelly sheep, out in the open air. They came and they got the witness. And so that's how Christ entered the world. And how did he live? Well, we saw that he lived the first 30 years of his life before his ministry working as a carpenter, not in great wealth. He suffered just as we suffered. He suffered illness just as we suffered illness. And when he entered his ministry, he had a gospel, a message of love and of hope, and he was treated very, very badly. And so he was an itinerant preacher, living in tents, here and there where he went. Every time he started to make ground, bringing people hope and salvation, he had people constantly trying to trap him and kill him. And ultimately they did. And so if the scriptures are correct, and I believe they are, Christ was without sin. And so an innocent man was flogged beyond recognition, according to the prophecy of Isaiah 53. His form was marred beyond human likeness, is what Isaiah said. And so he was beaten, yet he had done no wrong. And he was nailed to a cross, and he was mocked, and he was spit on. The king of everything, the creator of all things, was nailed to a cross, falsely accused and mocked. That's suffering. God chose not to make himself immune to suffering that's in this world, the hate that is felt by people in the world, the persecution that's felt by people in this world. And so, getting back to your question, I don't have a full answer to that, but I do know that God chose to subject himself to those same horrors of suffering, and yet he still calls us to come to him. And he offers us a free gift. And so that's a wonderful God. I mean, it blows my mind. I've been walking in the Christian faith since I was 18 years old. And I'm still in awe of who God is, what he's done through Christ and through human history. And I look forward to the end of all things, where we see in the book of Revelation that it says that God's going to wipe away every tear from their eye. There will be no more suffering, no more pain. God's going to make it right. And he's going to do it in a beautiful way. We have to be patient and just know that day's coming. And everything's going to be fine after that. So,
what would you say to people dealing with their own cross to bear, with their pain, literal pain that you deal with all the time, that are feeling hopeless, like there's no way out? what would you tell those types of people, or how do you deal with those types of cases? And maybe their pain is so strong that every day is suffering and it's too much to bear.
Like a physical pain, which brings mental pain, which brings emotional pain. My advice to them is don't suffer alone.
Oh, that's good advice.
That's one thing that sometimes can be painful as a clinician, is that you enter into your patient's world in ways, and that's an empathetic response that you'd hope clinicians would have.
Well, some don't.
Empathetic response of understanding that person's pain, getting into their world. But that's why community is so important, and that's why having confidants, that you can, that are willing to let you gripe and complain, and maybe even redirect you some. That's why that's so important. And so I would say get into a relationship. There might not be easy answers for why you're suffering or when this suffering will end. But in the meantime, don't do it alone. Get around people that will love you through it and will help you. And that's a beautiful thing about community. So that'd be my encouragement. But as a clinician, I am constantly, we talked about the curiosity of learning. I'm constantly trying to make myself better because I want to have the answers for my patients. And I got to know my limitations too. I can't heal everybody, but I can do my very best to become educated on the best treatments and the best approaches to help people. And that's what I'm focusing on, so they don't have to suffer. I've been thankful to pull some of those people out of those depths of depression because of that.
By being empathetic and listening to them?
Empathetic and, keeping my game up. Keeping my game up,
Yeah.
To be, praise God, but to be able to be the healer for those people,
Do you feel like God works through you in that way? Like that's your gift?
All I know is that God has given me certain abilities in all aspects of life, and I did not create those. I did not, you look at people that don't have the brains to become a physical therapist, but they have the brains to do something else or whatever. We're all stewards of what God's given us. And when we realize that we're stewards of whether it's wealth or skills or brain power or social situation or whatever, I think it's our responsibility to use those for the benefit of others. And so that's what I want to do. And so, I do find myself in the role of healer because God has, for some reason, He granted me those abilities, and He gave me a curiosity to be pretty good at it, and so I'm going to not make light of that responsibility, and I'm going to use it to the best of my ability to help others.
Well, I think you're doing a really good job.
Yeah,
I mean, like I said, when I met you, I really, I don't know what you would want to call it, but I saw the light, and I really loved your message and your approach. And I thought you were somebody who really wanted to help people. Truly, not just in and out, let's get you going, but truly like on a personal level almost. Really see change in people.
So that holistic approach.
Well,
the whole person.
I'm into that,
People are valuable. They have intrinsic worth. Doesn't matter what you look like, where you come from, what your skin color is, what education you have. You have intrinsic value because you're made in the image of God. And I'm that's how I interact with people. So that's what makes my heart beat, and I enjoy that. I enjoy the calling God's given me to do that.
So. Well, I can see that in you and your family. You have a beautiful family,
Thank you.
So I like that I can visibly see it, because So Reid, where can people, where do you work if people wanted to work with you?
Sure.
Where would they go? How would they find out your information?
Yeah. So I'm a professor. That's what I spend most of my time doing. But thankfully, I'm still able to work with patients because without that, I don't know what I would do. So I do work with patients on a regular basis. And so there's a place called Texas Tech Physicians website. You can just type in Texas Tech Physicians Physical Therapy, and it'll take you to a link to to all my contact information. So that's how people can get a hold of me.
Cool. Well, is there anything else you want to leave people with?
It was a wonderful conversation.
Yes, it was really good.
A lot of areas and
it was
all
really
aspects
good.
of life. Yeah, thank you for having me on.
Yeah, I mean, you did great.
Questions.
You really were inspirational, and I feel like people could feel your soul in the conversation.
I hope it blesses others.
Yes, it will. It will. All right. Well, thank you guys for tuning in, and we will see you on the next episode. All right. Bye.
Bye.